We'll get into all these stories, but first, let's take a quick look back at the week that was Donald Trump.
I have a message for the terrorists trying to kill our citizens. We will find you. We will destroy you. And we will absolutely win, and we will win soon.
We're not taking it to them, and we have to take it to them.
Anyone who cannot name our enemy is not fit to lead our country.
Our border will be protected, and our children will be safe. Very, very safe.
We will make America strong again. We will make America safe again. And we will make America great again, greater than ever before. It is time for a change. What do you have to lose by trying something new? I will fix it. Watch.
Here with reaction, former Speaker of the House, Fox News contributor Newt Gingrich is with us. Mr. Speaker, great to see you as always.
It's good to see you.
The week that was Trump, this was a pretty amazing week from my perspective. I would argue even the best week he's had in the campaign. Reason? I think he stood on message. He only talked about Obama and Hillary, talked about failures, and he offered solutions to some very significant problems that we face as a country and a world. And then, of course, his trip to Louisiana earlier today.
Well, I think this was clearly the best week he's had since he announced last year. And I think you're right. Part of what made it so powerful a week is he showed leadership. He showed leadership on dealing with the irreconcilable wing of Islam that threatens us with terrorism. He showed leadership in Milwaukee in working with Sheriff Clark and with Mayor Rudy Giuliani to develop a very powerful speech on very short notice and delivered it very well. He showed leadership in North Carolina. He showed leadership in going to Louisiana at a time when you have Barack Obama golfing and not able to get off the vacation. And you have Hillary Clinton apparently tired and taking a day or two off to rest. And so you saw real leadership. And finally, in his speech today in Michigan, his direct appeal to the African-American community, his clear statement that he wants to be a vehicle to change their lives, to offer them a chance to have safety in places like Milwaukee and Chicago and Baltimore, that he wants to represent all Americans. I don't know of any Republican presidential candidate in modern times who has had the willingness to reach out and include all Americans in their appeal. And that makes, I think, this the best week so far of his campaign and potentially a historic turning point in defining Trump versus Clinton.
When you have 81 days to go now, if we're looking for the secret sauce, I think right now it's about winning days and putting days together and winning weeks in a campaign. And I think that's very pivotal leading up to important debates. But if objectively speaking, from my perspective, him staying focused on Hillary and Obama's failures and talking about real issues and talking about how bad things have gotten and how much better things can be, it seems to be a special sauce there. That seems to be working versus getting distracted by maybe an off-the-cuff comment and using a teleprompter. How important going forward is that he continue this?
Well, I think it's tremendously important, and I think he's winning with it. And I think, he's a very smart guy, and I think he's going to do what works. And the fact is, he's the one who insisted on Tuesday in Milwaukee that they use a teleprompter because he knew that what he wanted to say was so compelling and at the same time so potentially dangerous that you had to say it with great clarity and with great discipline, and that's exactly what he pulled off. And I think you'll see a lot more of this. I also think adding people of the caliber of Steve Bannon and Kellyanne Conway mean that he's going to have a drive and an energy and a detailed understanding of social media that will really be remarkable in helping him fashion what he wants to achieve. He clearly wants to win.
What do you think about Paul leaving?
Well, I don't know what all the details were. I thought Paul did an important job in getting through the convention and getting the campaign more of a national campaign, more of a professional campaign. My guess is that Paul was being very generous in recognizing that all the news media was never going to let up on whatever happened in Ukraine, unlike their willingness to ignore Podesta and Clinton and Russia. And so I think probably in that sense, this was the right outcome. But nobody should underestimate how much Paul Manafort did to really help get this campaign to where it is right now.
It's very interesting. You mentioned his speech in Michigan earlier today, and I think it was very similar to his reach out just outside of Milwaukee to the black community. We have a 58% increase black Americans on food stamps since Obama's been president, 20% increase black community out of the labor force since Obama's been president. And what was interesting is on Monday when he talked about ISIS, he talked about the persecution of women, gays, lesbians, Christians, and Jews in countries like Saudi Arabia that give Hillary money. And then he talked about the black community. Then he talked about the same thing. And then he said this in North Carolina. I think we'd be negligent if we didn't play what he said last night that got so much attention.
Sometimes in the heat of debate and speaking on a multitude of issues, you don't choose the right words or you say the wrong thing. I have done that. And believe it or not, I regret it. And I do regret it, particularly where it may have caused personal pain. Too much is at stake for us to be consumed with these issues. But one thing I can promise you this, I will always tell you the truth.
That, I thought, was a huge moment. What was your reaction to that?
Well, first of all, the country thought it was a huge moment. The number of people who told me they thought it was a huge moment. Look, Donald Trump is a remarkable person, and he's extraordinarily smart, and he is remarkably successful, and he's a great competitor. But he had a little difficulties. It was almost like a contest between his stubbornness and his IQ. His IQ really knew that he had to move to a new level, that he had to become a real presidential alternative. His stubbornness said, wait a second, I've always been this guy. I carried 37 primaries. You know, why am I having to change? And I think what you've seen this week is literally, I don't know if you'll like the term or not, but you've seen a more mature and in a way a more humble Donald Trump, a guy who's beginning to realize that seeking to lead the most complicated country in the world, seeking to lead 325 million people, is a real burden, and that you've got to think through in a very special way how you're going to lead the American people and how you're going to bring them together. Mm-hmm. This has been a week where he's talked over and over about bringing people together in a way that's really very, very important.
You know, it's interesting because Hillary had her post-convention bounce, Trump had his, and now the polls begin to tighten again. You had Rasmussen and Zogby within 2 points this week, LA Times 0.6% difference. Do you see this? Well, let me ask you this straight up. Do you think he wins this?
Yeah, for two reasons. First of all, I was privileged to sit through a 2-hour briefing over at the Republican National Committee outlining all the things they've learned about Hillary Clinton and Bill Clinton. It is so staggering. We haven't seen 10% of what we're going to learn in September. She is going to drown under the impact. And you're seeing it, by the way, already when you have somebody like former Democratic Governor Ed Rendell, who is also a former Democratic National Chairman, saying they ought to close the foundation. When you see the Boston Globe, a liberal paper, say, close the foundation. Every Democratic candidate in the country in the next 20 days will be asked by the Republican candidate, are you for closing the Clinton Foundation?
By the way, they're not even going to close it unless she wins. And she said she would have closed it when she was a senator.
Well, first of all, here's the real problem. Whatever they say now about what they're going to restrict, you have to ask, so why didn't you do that when you were Secretary of State? Because it is admitting that there is at least an appearance of corruption. And frankly, given what I've seen in the last 24 hours, there are case after case after case. So my first point, Sean, is she's going to lose. Now, when she loses, Donald Trump's going to win. But my second point, and the reason I'm so excited about this week, is Donald Trump is on the verge of creating a genuinely historic movement which brings together Americans of all backgrounds, not just Republicans, but potentially a bigger coalition than Reagan had. And that's where his appeals, and he's meeting tomorrow with Latino leaders in New York. You're going to see more and more effort, I think, for them to bring all Americans together to make America great again. That, to me, the combination of his doing positive things as she sinks, could lead to a historic election.
All right, Mr. Speaker, thanks for being with us. We'll have more with Newt Gingrich right after this break. Don't go anywhere. Coming up next, though, as well.
We will defeat radical Islamic terrorism, just as we have defeated every threat we've faced at every age and before. But we will not, remember this, defeat it with closed eyes or silenced voices.
Donald Trump laying out his plan to take out ISIS, defeat radical Islam, and protect the homeland. Newt Gingrich will react to Trump's big speech from earlier in the week and then later tonight. Trump.
We will defeat radical Islamic terrorism, just as we have defeated every threat we've faced at every age and before. But we will not, remember this, defeat it with closed eyes or silenced voices. A new immigration policy is needed immediately and as well. We should only admit into this country those who share our values and respect our people. In the Cold War, we had an ideological screening test. The time is overdue to develop a new screening test for the threats we face today. I call it extreme vetting. I call it extreme vetting. One of my first acts as president will be to establish a commission on radical Islam, which will include reformist voices in the Muslim community who will hopefully work with us. We want to build bridges and erase divisions. The goal of the commission will be to identify and explain to the American public the core convictions and beliefs of radical Islam, to identify the warning signs of radicalization, and to expose the networks in our society that support radicalization.
Donald Trump earlier this week laying out his plan to defeat ISIS and radical Islam. We continue now with the former Speaker of the House, Fox News contributor Newt Gingrich. All right, before I get to what he just said there about extreme vetting and certainly putting this commission together, I think it's important. We now know the president lied. Josh Earnest lied. John Kerry lied. The Iranians told the American people the truth about ransom paid for hostages. They specifically said they would never do that, and then they got caught and they had to admit it. What should happen?
Well, I think we should defeat Hillary Clinton. I mean, I think
yeah,
that. Look,
I agree with that.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think the Congress ought to hold hearings. They ought to make sure it's all in the public record. But the truth is, if you have an entire administration dedicated to being dishonest, it is very hard under normal circumstances to control them. That's why this election is so important. I mean, how could anybody who is angry about Kerry and Obama and Ernst, how could they possibly tolerate a Hillary Clinton presidency? Because she lies more than they do. She is vastly more corrupt than they are. I mean, nobody's ever actually suggested that Obama is corrupt, but she's actually corrupt. And that she has misused the office.
Well, we learned more this week. I mean, clearly she sold access and profited from her office for the Clinton Foundation.
But here's why Trump is so central to America's future. He is the first politician who's been willing to really take on the entire corrupt establishment. You have the big banks who, if they had told the truth during 2008 and 2009, would have lost, all of their CEOs would have lost their jobs. You have the lobbyists in Washington, many of whom have behaved in ways that are totally indefensible. And their whole job was to win for their client, not to put the country first. You have the big unions, the teachers union, who doesn't care if the students fail to learn, if their lives are ruined, as long as the teachers union gets what it wants, which is money. You go down the list. You have the big donors, the people, the George Soroses of the world, who want globalization at the expense of the American people. When you go through all of that, you realize They can't tell the truth about what they're doing any more than Obama. If Obama had told the truth about Obamacare, you're not going to keep your doctor, you're not going to keep your insurance,
Never
your
passes.
premiums are going to go up, your deductibilities are going to go up, they'd have been slaughtered. He would not have gotten reelected.
Yeah.
And so they've consistently chosen lying if that's what it takes to survive.
You know, and the American people have suffered. And I give out the numbers all the time about poverty, food stamps, labor participation, lowest home ownership rate in 51 years, 1 in 5 American families, nobody in the family works, you know, the worst recovery since the 40s. Let me go to Trump's comments, though. If we're going to protect this homeland, and you have people coming from countries that practice Sharia, which is the antithesis of our constitutional republic, our very own constitution, our rule of law, about the treatment of women, gays, lesbians, freedom of religion and thought. Saudi Arabia contributes to Clinton. She doesn't criticize their practices at all. They discriminate against all those people. He talks about extreme vetting. To me, it's common sense. But there are Americans that think somehow that is bigoted or unfair. I think if somebody wants to come here, don't they have to assimilate?
Look, I watched Jim Woolsey, the former director of the Central Intelligence Agency under Bill Clinton, former Deputy Secretary of the Navy under Jimmy Carter. And Woolsey said immediately after the speech, this is exactly what we did in the Cold War. We understood we were up against communism, not just the Russians. We were up against communism. And therefore, we vetted you to make sure you weren't a communist dedicated to undermining our country, where we wouldn't let you in. What Trump has done is he has raised the core question about what is at its heart an ideological war. And that is, I'm very much for legal immigration if you want to become an American. But I am not for somebody who comes here whose goal is to subvert and destroy the Constitution. And we have every right as Americans to defend ourselves and to defend our way of life and to defend our institutions of freedom.
What do you think of his idea for a commission on studying and coming up with strategies and tactics to deal with radical Islamists?
Well, it'll depend, first of all, on who you appoint, because if you pick somebody from the Muslim Brotherhood, the commission will be destructive. But given the people like General Flynn, who Trump is relying on, I think they'd pick good people. I thought the commission was a brilliant idea because we have to find a way to get right in the heart of this conversation about what is acceptable, what isn't, what should we be looking for in potential radicalization. For example, if you find out that you have a mosque which preaches jihad and which is recruiting people to go and join ISIS, I think there's a point here where that national safety transcends the right of that mosque to preach hatred. And those are the kind of things that are very delicate. You got to think it through. Again, New York under Giuliani and Bloomberg had a remarkable police program. They probably did the best job of anybody in America at tracking down radicals, and they stopped a lot of potential attacks because they were proactively looking for radicals before they killed somebody.
All right, Mr. Speaker, thank you so much for being with us. We appreciate it. And coming up next on the special edition of Hannity.
The only way to change results is to change leadership.
Donald Trump on Message this week, prosecuting the case against Hillary Clinton while explaining his positive agenda to solve America's problems. Doug Schoen, Mercedes Schlapp, they join us next with reaction and later tonight.
Law and order must be restored.
Trump promising to restore law and order if elected president. His attorney, Michael Cohen, will join us later tonight. That and more in the special edition of Hannity.